Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mansfield Pentecostal Church, and for all of those visitors, welcome to our online evening Bible study. I want to give you a warm welcome. I hope that you enjoy our time as we study the scriptures. My name is Matthew. I'm the teaching and lead and teaching pastor of the church. And during our Bible study, we normally break it into 3 short sessions. We have a thought to think about, a question to ponder, and a text to study. Also, I want to encourage those of you in the church who are part of a life group. When I give you the question to ponder and the text to study, I'm going to ask you, encourage you, if you get opportunities in your life groups, think about the question, study the text in your groups. Or maybe church members, if you want to grab someone during the week, invite someone around for a socially distanced coffee or do whatever you can. The question to ponder is something maybe for you to discuss as you meet together throughout the course of the week. Throughout history, most societies, most cultures have always been aware that behind the physical and natural world, there's an unseen spiritual world, obviously, that we're not aware of with our 5 physical senses. And what amazes me is that even though we live in an increasingly scientific age, a lot of people are still interested in spiritual things and spiritual issues. It amazes me how many people are interested in reading their horoscopes or, going to seances, even though they would still use technology and all the devices of modern science in a world. It seems that in spite of the fact that we live in a rational age, yet people are still deeply spiritually intuitive. It fascinates me how, some people will not book their holidays on the 13th, or that, they won't book, or some hotels who don't even have what they call a 13th floor, when we all know that the 14th floor is actually the 13th floor. You see, these beliefs in spiritual realities or these superstitious practices all reveal that people have a belief, even a fear, of an unseen spiritual world or unseen powers that have control over our lives. And yet I would say that many of our fears of the spiritual, many of our fears, the unknown world, the spiritual world, really come out of an ignorance. The Bible, which I believe is God's word, clearly reveals that there is a spiritual world behind the natural world. And I believe that as we are enlightened, as we are informed by the teaching of the Bible, actually fear is dispelled in our life. You see, the Bible clearly reveals that in our world, in the unseen world, there are people, there are persons who are created, who are intelligent, who are able to make moral choices and decisions just like us. But unlike us, those persons do not have a body. The Bible is also clear that not all of these persons are working for the same boss. Some of them are working, or many of them I should say, are actually working for God and for the kingdom of light. Some of them are actually working against God in the kingdom of darkness. And now those people, those persons, those beings that are working for God, we would normally call angels. Those beings who are working against God's purposes and seeking to thwart God's purpose on earth, we would sometimes call demons, though I'd rather call them unclean spirits. And this means that behind the calm and sometimes pristine world that we live in, there is a spiritual reality. But as we all know, the world that we live in isn't all that calm. The world that we live in is very much a world that is broken and disjointed and very dysfunctional. And that in some ways reflects the reality of the spiritual world, the unseen world that lies behind the natural world. Both good and harmful spiritual beings are working in our world for different ends. And it is my hope that throughout this study, as we look over these next few weeks on the topic of angels and demons, it's my hope that we will become more informed of the spiritual realities of the world that we face. However, before we delve into the world of spiritual warfare, and the battle that for those of us who are Christians that we face against the world, the devil, and our flesh, I want us to focus the first part of our study on the good guys, the angels. You know, growing up in a Christian home, I'm reminded I had various stories of people who I know of who had encounters with angels. I think of one conversation I remember having a number of years ago with a guy who is now a pastor of a church in Australia. And he was telling me on one occasion how he took a team of people to a certain part of the world that was quite troubled. And when he was there, he explained to this team, he set some boundaries. He told them they were not to wander off on their own. They were stay indoors while it was dark. But unfortunately, one of the team members, a young lady, happened to stray from the rest of the team. It was getting late at night, and she found herself in a very intimidating situation. She found herself being surrounded by a group of men who were associated with the occult. One of the men, very intimidatingly, started to urinate on her bag where she had placed it nearby. Another man started to approach her. In that moment of deep panic and anxiety and fear, this pastor recalls to me that she called out to the Lord. And then he said something remarkable happened. It seemed as if out of nowhere, a well-built guy just turned up. It was this guy who was well-built, really tall, and he accosted the man who was about to get hold of this girl. He squared up to him, he faced up to him, and he told them under no uncertain terms to back off. Well, in the confusion of the moment, the girl managed to escape. And no one knows what happened to those men, those guys, or that unknown stranger. But somehow I seem to think that in the midst of that situation, God sent an angel to help that young person. All this goes to show that angels, I believe, play a very practical and important part in our lives, even though for the majority of the time we are totally unaware of their presence. And this all, of course, leads us to ask the question, what then are angels? Let me give you a definition, a biblical definition. Angels are created spiritual beings with moral judgment and high intelligence, but without physical bodies. Let's break that definition down. Firstly, they are created spiritual beings. They are not by any means in the category of God. God is uncreated, whereas angels are created. They are part of the universe that God actually created. There's a passage in the Bible where Ezra speaks of the host of heaven, and he's obviously speaking of angels. And clearly Ezra understands that angels are created beings. He says this in his prayer, "You alone are the Lord. You made the heavens, even the highest heavens, and all their starry hosts, the earth and all that is in them, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to everything, and the multitudes of heaven worship you." Very clearly, Ezra puts angels in the category of created things, as does the Apostle Paul when he says, "For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him." So angels are created beings. Angels are also moral beings. They, like us, are able to make moral choices, moral decisions. Angels have even been known to sin. Yet there's an amazing difference. When we sin, God offers us the promise of a redemption and reconciliation to us. What a wonderful privilege that we have as human beings. But it seems as if that offer is not made to angels. In fact, Peter says in his epistle, he says that God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment. And so angels are created beings, they are moral beings, but also they're incredibly intelligent beings. They're known to sing, and they sing the high praises of God. They're known to communicate with people. And so they are incredibly intelligent beings as well. So since angels are unembodied spiritual beings, they're not creatures that we would see with our natural eyes, unless, of course, on occasion that God may give us the ability to see them. The ordinary activities of worship to God are protecting and guarding those of us who will inherit salvation, all happen as invisible agents. And yet sometimes angels choose to manifest themselves in the natural world with physical bodies. In fact, the writer of Hebrews puts it like this: do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without even knowing it. Isn't that incredible? That angels actually are engaged in a very real way in the world around us, though sometimes we are not fully aware of that. Believe it or not, angels actually play a very practical role in the unseen world, even as practical as the length of our hair. For reasons I do not know the answer to, the Apostle Paul, when writing to the church of Corinth, said that actually the length of our hair actually helps angels to distinguish the difference between men and women. Well, it is even as practical as that. Over these next few weeks, as we study the subject of angels and demons, I hope that we will delve in not just to the theory of this, but also the practicalities of this world, that angels actually do play a very integral part of our lives, even though most of the time we are unaware of them and we don't actually see them. Well, that's the thought to think about. What about a question to ponder? The question to ponder is this: how does the thought of worshipping in the company of angels make you feel? Does it in any way affect your attitude to worship? Discuss that in your life groups, or you get together with different people during the week. How does the thought of worshipping in the company of angels make you feel? Does it affect your attitude to worship in any way? And a text to study, I want you to read Hebrews chapter 1, verses 14. And the question I want to ask you is this: what does this text say about the role angels play? What does this text say about the role angels play? How does it make you feel? Well, thank you for listening on our online short Bible study. Have a great rest of the evening, and hope to see you at some point in the near future. God bless you.